the team that will be leading us. So I am so pleased to introduce today's session, led by the dynamic Rowan Tree team of Amy Dagliano and Kate Viggiano Janich, who are going to be talking to us about building community. Now, these two women know a thing or two about community, having built their own successful co-working, co-growing workspace, Rowan Tree. Kate and Amy are not only co-owners, they're also lifelong friends who have the complementary skills needed to build a business. Amy is the inspiration cultivator with a background in print design, branding, culture and team building, employee engagement. In short, Amy is the creative brainstormer you want on your team. Kate is the positivity instigator. Don't you just love that title?
Amy came up with it. She's so creative.
I love that title. With expertise in program management, event coordination, strategic communication, stakeholder relationship management, change management, employee engagement, oh my goodness. And not only that, Kate is also the co-founder of the grassroots group, Together We Will Northern Virginia. Rowan Tree is also a longtime Women's Summit partner. In fact, Rowan Tree in Reston is where the Women's Summit planning meetings are held. So if you're interested in helping out with next year's Women's Summit, yes, I'm going there, looking for volunteers for next year, put the Rowan Tree address in your contact list. We'll be back there planning for next year's summit as soon as we can start meeting face-to-face again. Now, Kate and Amy didn't choose the name Rowan Tree by chance. The Rowan Tree has a long tradition in European mythology and folklore as a magical tree symbolizing courage, wisdom, and protection. And today, Kate and Amy are going to share with us the magic of community building when women work together. Kate and Amy, it's back to you.
Thank you for that phenomenal introduction. We wanted to take some time to first just set the stage for today. So our very own Danielle Scherf in a conversation said something that we felt was so accurate, but she said, collaboration gives life to ideas that might otherwise have died. And it's so true. And that's really why we're here today. Amy and I, as Robin mentioned, have been best friends for more than 16 years. We actually met through my childhood friend. We both ended up in this area from New Jersey, and my friend Ryan introduced me to his roommate, Amy. And we very quickly realized that not only do we have a lot in common, we're artists at heart, we are, try to achieve a lot, do good. We found out we actually had the same exact birthday. April 9th, same year, same date. And so over the years, we decided that at our what birthday, Amy, our 38th birthday, we were actually out, and we'll go to it later. But we realized that we wanted to create something special for women. We realized that in this DC time, being in DC all the time, everything's so focused on competition, and we're kind of tired of it. So we wanted to create something different. And today, what we wanted to talk about was to have a discussion around how collaboration over competition truly works in the world of business, politics, and everyday life. We know we can do things differently, and we've seen it work well, and we've realized it's important to share and to help others do the same. So we want everyone to walk away with some thoughts around how we can think about working with those who we usually conceive as competitors, how we can look at them a little bit differently. Maybe they don't need to be a threat. Maybe it's something different. Because sometimes when we work with people who maybe otherwise we are a little jealous of, or we are trying to consistently compete with, we actually open up so much more potential for power. We can be more effective. We can have the opportunity to actually find out what really sets us apart when we work with people who are kind of similar. So with that, I wanted to hand it off to Amy, and if you can switch the slide, Robin.
Yeah, and so I think Kate started to mention this, but do you have someone, whether it's a person or a company, who you look at with a little bit of admiration and a little bit of jealousy? And so we'd love to see some posts in the chat about if you can think of somebody that might be like that is a little bit of competition, but a little bit of intimidation, but also a little bit of admiration, because that's what we're going to talk about today. And we'd love to see if you may have some examples like that as well. And while people are posting them in the chat, I'm going to ask Robin to flip through a couple of slides of unlikely partnerships that we found when we were researching for this topic. Of course, the Avengers, together they are so much stronger, and their powers combined can, you know, defeat. I don't even remember the guy's name, but the guy was
evil. Just
yeah,
he's
evil.
going down.
and the next.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
This was actually thanks to Louisa. I don't know how I didn't know this, but that the women's suffrage movement and the temperance movement actually joined forces so that they could each amplify the voices of both women and the temperance. So that was a little interesting fact because, I mean, I know we like our wine, so, but it worked. It worked. Okay, next one.
That's how we got the right to vote.
Right? Yeah, that, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. That is how we got the right to vote, which is the whole point of all of this. Okay, Grace and Frankie. I mean, we love Grace and Frankie. It's a little bit lighter than the previous one, but Amy and I were trying to figure out which one is which, like which one of us would be Grace or Frankie. And we realized that one of the reasons we actually worked so well together was we're a little bit blend of both. I would say, I don't know, Amy's so creative though. We're both creative. Next one. Okay, you know, like they're very different, but it's a necessary partnership, and especially right now, it's so important that these people really support each other. We love Elizabeth, but we need her help so much, and she brings so much strength behind, you know, Joe. She brings the more progressive people, and when they get together and work towards the same mission, there's just so much more potential here instead of divvying up in our corners. Next slide. And of course,
This one's just cute.
it's good for our souls to see that. Okay. Okay, so we talked a little bit about before, but Amy and I have, as I mentioned, been best friends for 16 years. And we had never thought about running a business together. But it wasn't until we were turning 37, all the years are blending, we decided to celebrate our birthday by going to a dive bar. And there was, of course, karaoke and crappy beer, and there was still actually a smoking section, which blew my mind. But the bigger thing, what happened that night, was that we started brainstorming of a dream. We just said, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing to have a place where women can get together and nurture parts of themselves, their dreams or whatever it was, but come together with other women and find a way to fulfill themselves. And we didn't know what that looked like. I mean, it was a birthday idea after a few beers. And then a few weeks later, we were both working from home and we hadn't seen each other in a while. And so Amy said, well, hey, Kate, why don't I come over to your house and we'll work together? Little did we know that we were co-working, which was what the business was that we were going to create. So we took a walk in the woods, and we're just talking about how we've been growing over the years. Amy had a really tough bout of Lyme disease that got her in bed for more than a year. We both were kind of at a point in our life where we were ready to try something different. And by the time we got on the way back, we said, you know, that idea that we came up with on our birthday, like, I think I want to try it. I think I want to create something. And whoever the other one was like, me too. So we said, all right, well, let's go tell our husbands. So later on, by the end of the night, we had decided we were going to try this out. And so fast forward, and Amy, I'm going to hand it to you to just share what Rowan Tree really is about.
Sure. So, well, and before I step into what Rowan Tree is about, I want to just note on this slide a little bit. As we were kind of doing research, we found this niche of female-focused co-working, and how there are spaces across the country that are bringing women together. It doesn't matter the industry. They're all working to support one another and to build, whether it's build their business or grow themselves personally. And so we took a leap of faith and we reached out to one of these organizations and we said, hey, we're thinking about building something similar. Can we pick your brain a little bit, ask you some questions, just pick up some lessons learned? And they were amazing. They were so open and so giving and so thoughtful, and really helped save us a lot of time and effort and money and energy in what we were building, because they were so helpful and supportive of what we were doing. And so ultimately, this slide here you're seeing is what has grown. We have continued to reach out to women-focused co-working spaces that we've seen locally and across the country. And we have formed these partnerships where we're meeting on a regular basis to talk about what's happening in our community, obviously during COVID, to talk about reopening our space and all the logistics around that. But it just has proven, even Hera Hub, they're local in DC, and we don't see each other as competitors. We see each other as supporters of one another because we can both grow our businesses by being connected and being partners. And it's great because, you know, people who are not, you know, not close to Herndon, we send them over to Hera Hub, and people who are not close to DC, she sends them over to us. So it's been wonderful partnership. So as Kate said, Rowan Tree is actually in the background here, so I'm going to lean over so you can see it. It's about focusing on growing yourself, growing your business, taking care of yourself, connecting with others, and supporting one another. And because the first people we reached to showed us that collaboration was way stronger than competition, we've extended that and we've shown that to our members, and they're doing the same in our membership base and collaborating with one another and building each other's businesses. So we're going to pop over to the next slide, Robin. And Kate, I'll pass this to you. But before we do, I did want to note Cheryl Hatoner had mentioned in our panelists, in our chat when we were talking about, can you think of somebody you're a little bit jealous of or intimidated? She's a registered dietitian, and she sees nutritionists and health coaches who seem to excel by marketing and engaging with the community better than she had done by herself just in private practice. So that's a great example, Cheryl. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, beautiful space, and thank you. Yeah, we're about helping women build their businesses and themselves at the same time. So this quote is, "Collaboration has no hierarchy. The sun collaborates with soil to bring flowers on the earth." And that's what Rowan Tree is all about. We learned this really interesting fact about trees. It's called the secret life of pets and hidden life of trees keep crossing in my mind. But we learned what trees do is they actually have families of trees. And in a forest, all of their roots underneath the ground, they deliver nutrients to each other. They share nutrients. And if one tree is sick, the family of trees will slowly send these nutrients over to the sick tree. They'll give each other notice if there's pests coming or danger coming through vibrations and smells and all these amazing things. And so we feel that this is what the world could really be about, is giving each other nutrients and supporting each other so we're all stronger for it. So one of the interesting collaborations we've actually developed, well, as we know now with Network Nova, has been such a powerful one. But when we built this, we're kind of a cross between this professional development workspace and an office space, but there's a lot of connection and networking happening. And what we realized was, especially in DC, there are a lot of different groups of networking, especially women-focused groups. And it's very easy to get protective of thank you, the secret life of trees. It's very easy to get very protective of your stuff, right? Like it's hard. Remember when you're in school and you want to kind of like hide your answers. But what we found was when you actually open up, not that we're cheating, but when you open up and put down that guard, there's so much more potential. So we connected with groups like Clearly Network Nova, DC Fempreneur, which I don't know if you've ever met Lisa Shapiro. She is dynamite, creative, an amazing connector. SOAR Community Network, who we will hear from in a minute with Mali, Awesome Women Entrepreneurs, and other groups. So what we do is we've developed these partnerships where we refer our programming to each other's members, because our goal is to make everybody stronger, including our members. And so it ends up helping us all, and we end up providing more value because of it. And what we also found was our members are following our lead. So we have about 90, almost 100 members, and we've now seen them. They're all different types of professions. They are partnering up and referring each other. They're joining up with programming. They're hiring each other for services. They're creating their own circles of networks within our community. And it's the most unlikely, like we have one group, it's a mosaic and tea shop. We have a yoga and a running teacher. We've had 2 different marketing professionals partner up, so they help refer each other and bolster each other. So it's been really inspiring, and we see it working. And I know, as Amy mentioned, especially during these times of COVID, it's been incredibly important because everyone's floundering just a little bit. So if we could go to the next slide. Amy, you wanted to take this one?
Sure, and I think we just popped over, but it was, there was a question that we wanted to throw out to the, yep, there we go, to the audience of what are some interesting and unexpected partnerships that you have seen or that you have participated in? We'd love to see that. And I think that someone mentioned in the chat that they've seen that a lot in Frederick with small businesses partnering together. And we have partnerships with other brick and mortar women-owned spaces in the Herndon, Reston, Sterling area. Again, we're all completely different industries, but face some of the same challenges and thought it was important to connect with one another and support one another. Vinyl store, I missed that up in the chat, so we'll go back and refer to that. Looks like somebody loves the vinyl store example, so we'll go back to that. Adrian, I noticed in the Q&A that you have mentioned a franchise in Fairfax for Rowan Tree. Certainly something we have thought about, and maybe in the future at some point, but at the moment we're focused in the Herndon location. Barbara mentions here in the chat, after doing Myers-Briggs analysis in a work team, we all started making new connections and had a new respect for others' differences. That's awesome. Thank you, Barbara.
That's exactly the spirit of this.
Yeah.
So do you want to go to the next one?
Yep, Robin, go ahead.
So, and again, we want you to know our space, it's focused on women, but we're open to all. And we actually have a really strong, small, mighty group of men who are members, and we call them Browans. So I want to just make that clear. This isn't just about women. This tends to be geared for women. And what I'm about to say is women do lead differently. But we found that the men members have some of those really amazing traits of leadership that women also have. So there's some interesting themes there. Thank you, Browans. We know that women lead differently. Our nature is to connect. Our nature is to nurture. Our nature is to link people to help where they need it. I mean, there's power in that. There's power of of using emotion to drive us forward. And that's exactly why we created a space like this. And we keep running into these amazing leaders who are women, and they are charging ahead using their instincts and their natural abilities. So with that, this is why we have Danielle and Louisa and Malie today. And so we're going to go ahead and just share our panel view, and we're going to have a little bit of this discussion. So if you don't mind, Robin, clicking over to the, there you go. I wanted to just take a minute to introduce our team again very lightly, and then what we're going to do is go into a little bit of a discussion, and we're going to hear from each of our panelists about some of their perspectives, but we'll certainly have some conversation and welcome everyone to chime in. I wanted to first introduce you to Louisa. She, as you all heard, she's this amazing leader of this Virginia Grassroots Coalition. She is this natural facilitator. She brings this perspective of collaboration and bringing unlikely partners together through her grassroots coordination. And then we have Danielle Scherf. Danielle is a founder of Scherf Consulting. So she does government consulting and management consulting, but she also does a lot of community engagement and leadership. So she kind of marries in this DC world and taking some of those skills in that work world, but also brings them to the community and bridges the two. And then finally, I want to introduce to Malie, who she is the CEO of the SOAR Community Network and the Nebula. And she and her partner, they bring together community and business leaders who are focused on mission and making the world a better place. So she brings together a very unusual group of people who all learn from each other. So we thought it was a great mix of people who can demonstrate how this concept is relevant in business, in politics, and in just general life, because we don't have to live in fear of each other. We can live in a place of collaboration and celebrating each other's strengths. So with that, Louisa, each person will have around 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll share about your perspectives, and we'll have some discussion. So Louisa, go ahead and tell us, what perspective do you bring? Like, what's been your experience, especially around that grassroots?
Yeah, so I think the Virginia Grassroots Coalition started in April of 2017, and it was really with the purpose of encouraging collaboration. So as many people on this call know, Trump was elected, and all of a sudden, all of these grassroots groups popped up. They were indivisibles, they were swing lefts, they were huddles from the Women's March, and sometimes they were just neighbors getting together because they felt like they needed to find others like themselves who wanted to find a way to take action. And while it was so wonderful to have sort of all of these flowers blooming, right, across Virginia, the challenge was that none of them were talking to each other. And so really this was a lot of isolated small groups with their own small amounts of power. And it got to a point where we had all of these volunteers who started showing up even at our meetings, Kate with Together We Will, saying, hey, we went to these other meetings for other groups. You guys seem to all be doing the same thing, but you're not talking together. And it was from their feedback that it became pretty clear that we weren't going to be successful if we stayed divided, that we really had to find a way to come together. And so my role as facilitator of the Grassroots Coalition was trying to figure out a way to do that, acknowledging that all of these groups were new and their leadership was still trying to figure out what did it mean to even be a leader of each of these groups. And so I tried to be very careful at the beginning to not take away from the leadership and the building of the strength of each of these groups individually, but try to find a way to take that strength and then amplify it by bringing everyone together at the coalition level. So I think it's really important that early on, we just learned together. We spent time identifying the things that we didn't know and tried to figure out how do we get better at what we think we want to do and defining where this coalition can create the greatest benefit. So I think part of what was so important was this coming together of groups that, did not intentionally plan to do so at the beginning. Secondly, I think there was a challenge. Like, we talk about your competitors. Well, all these groups showed up and they became very clear competitors of the Democratic Party that had been around working on electoral politics and nonprofits that have been around working on legislative advocacy, because they were the new kid on the block and didn't really know where their niche was yet, right? And so we had to spend some time, one, trying to figure that out. And to be honest, we probably could have listened more at the beginning and acted less. That is not how these women worked, men as well, right? And so we kind of did it the opposite way. We definitely acted first. And, what we ended up doing was we showed with our energy and our time that we could get stuff done, right? And so in 2017, we had the opportunity to flip 17 seats in Virginia in the state house. The Democratic Party invested in 5 of them. Our coalition worked in all 17 and flipped 15 of those seats. And I think it was by showing up and showing the dedication that we had that eventually the people who, the groups that had already been there and had been doing good work started to realize, like, okay, maybe they needed to create some space for these new activists to have a role. And so in year 2, I really spent a lot of time thinking about those relationships and how to build those in an intentional way so that we weren't seeing each other as competitors anymore, but really understood that we were all aiming at the same goal, but we might be taking different lanes to get there. And so we saw a lot of that in our legislative advocacy this year. It was the first time that the coalition's really been involved in the advocacy space in a serious way. And that was because we flipped both the state house and Senate last year, and we had such a great opportunity to really push for serious change. And that meant really trying to understand, where is our voice the strongest, and how do we sort of carve out that lane in a way that we're not stepping on other people's toes and we're collaborating when needed, but realizing that collaboration isn't always going to be there. We will not always agree with others on what we're trying to do, but the one thing I've learned through my research and advocacy as well at Georgetown, where I work professionally, is that some of the most effective coalitions have unlikely partners, right? So when we passed health or Medicaid expansion in Virginia, it was because hospitals joined with nonprofits to push for change. When we passed the ERA, it was because small businesses got on board, not just the typical women's groups, right? It's really expanding that voice that ends up being really critical for some of these major advocacy efforts that we really want to see change happen, where we haven't seen change in, years or decades. So that's the perspective I bring.
You hit on so many points. I want you to know, first of all, that Harriet and all of us can agree, but she wrote that what you did was a game changer. And I can tell you, I remember sitting in that group with you and kind of being like, because everyone came with really loud voices, and you were able to really gracefully navigate that, and I think reflect. So I wanted to hear from you. What were some of those biggest challenges in that? Like, I know you told us the story of how you move forward, but I'd love to hear about some of those challenges and how did you figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, some of it was, there aren't easy solutions, right? And I think especially in this area, we have lots of incredibly overly educated, very type A types of people. And these were the people who would be showing up to our coalition meetings. And I think what was so important was, number one, I didn't set the agenda. I let everyone in the room set the agenda. And so it was their agenda. It was not imposed from outside or from someone who thought they knew what they were doing agenda. And that's how our agendas always work with our coalition meetings. And I think that's critical, because then it's owned by the people who are part of it. It's not owned by somebody who is trying to steer these groups in a certain direction. The other thing I usually say about the coalition is that it's really a marketplace of ideas. And so instead of it, again, being that we're choosing, you have to do X or Y, it's really a space for all of us in our creative ways to come and say, I really want to try this. Who's on board and who wants to join with me? And so you vote with your feet, and you vote with your members, and you vote with, okay, this sounds like a great initiative. I want to make sure that I put some energy behind it. And so I think rather than creating a space that requires voting and there has to be, we have to be clear on whose issues are more important or which strategies are more important, it really allows for a space of mutual learning and exploration. And I always just push people to say, if we're trying something new, let's try to measure the impact as well, so that we have a sense of, was it worth it? Was it worth our time? But I really try to lead with a yes, and how can we get this done, as opposed to a no, this could be, these are all of the challenges. Because in this work, there are many challenges, and it's really important for us to have this creative space where we can try new things. I think, nonprofit organizations and the Democratic Party, they all have structures that force them to be a little more rigid in what they do. And we are lucky to have the space to not have those constraints. And so we have to, I think our role in the grassroots is really to be that engine of pushing with new ideas and trying new things out, because we have that luxury to be able to do so.
Oh my gosh. You just said a few things that I'm like, yes. So just so you know, there's a whole conversation going on for you about Cheryl Krim, who's with For Sisterhood, and she's working on a documentary about the power of women, hope, and resistance. So she's going to connect with you.
Sounds good.
And then let's see, yes to collaboration. Another example is the NARAL, Pro-Choice Virginia advocating for Medicaid expansion.
Yep.
And yeah, I think people who have worked with you are agreeing that you don't let people dominate and that you meet people where they are. Yep. Rich says, yeah, okay, so you have a lot of people who are going to connect with you after, so that's great.
Sounds good. I'll give them my email in the chat.
Oh, sorry, did Lisa? There are people on it. They're like passing out your contact information. Oh. So you're set.
We're also, I mean, and that's the most fun part about this coalition is just watching everyone, evolve and become stronger leaders as part of the work that we do. And so, I mean, I love doing it because it energizes me, right? I have a lot of friends who have been, both with COVID, for sure with police brutality and Black Lives Matter, but just also with, Trump and all of the challenges we faced over the last 3 years. This is what keeps us going. And it's so important right now to have a community where you're with people who want to act. They don't want to just, sit and wallow in all of the challenges and all of the emotions that are, wrapped up in those.
Yeah, And before we move to Danielle, I wanted to just mention, I think you mentioned two things I think are really of note, at least in my mind. You said yes and I think that spirit of improv is so important. Anytime we're collaborating and working with people, especially when you're not really used to working with each other, it can be uncomfortable. You're trying not to step on each other's turf. And so I think coming at that approach, Louisa, of the yes and let's add and build as opposed to no, I don't think. That is an incredibly powerful tool. And I also think something that very similar Amy and I have experienced is when you're small and you're new and it's yours, even when it's yours as a group, you have this ability to be nimble and to do what feels right to you. And you're not caught up in the bureaucracy and the way things have always been. And there's something so freeing about that. And it's sometimes scary to lead that way because people are used to being led a certain way. But I think as soon as folks start seeing the impact and what actually can happen when you lead like that, very quickly people understand why it's so important that we can live in that spirit of collaboration and yes and. And yes, we're going to move on to Danielle. So, right. So Danielle, tell us a little bit about your experience and kind of your perspective that you've brought and why this conversation means something to you.
So I get excited about community and collaboration. Whenever you say the words, I get all excited. My business is Sheriff Consulting. I do government contracting. That's my day job, but I feel like that's what fuels the rest of the work that I do. My actual physical community is Herndon, Virginia, which I love very much, and I'm very engaged there. But sort of I think the perspective that I bring is that there's ways to collaborate and build community no matter where you are. And when you think that, community means we have something in common, we value something in common. So think of all the things that people value and have in common. There's a million places where you can get engaged and make a difference. And I was listening to Louisa talking about, this idea of sort of being a generalist, right? Going into a space and being able to bring people together and convene a group and facilitate a conversation so that you bring out the absolute best from every person. And how much ideas sort of grow and build and change because you have the benefit of all of those things. You think there's a continuum there. You could do that among your friends. You're sitting at a table just batting around ideas over a glass of wine, or you can get a group of women together or others. And you can really put something together that changes the world. You have to be willing to recognize the contribution of everyone as having value. You have to recognize that an asset-based way of looking at the world, like this abundance of ideas and possibility is always there. You just have to tap into it. And you have to be able to look around and see who the people in your neighborhoods are, and recognize that there's always another seat at the table for someone to come and contribute, even when sometimes that gets a little scary. I remember the very first time I was at Rowan Tree. I was sitting very quietly because I am an introvert by nature, and I'm typing away, and I get a little email from from Kate across the room, and she said, "Hey, do you have a template for this thing?" And it was such a tiny little ask, and I caught my breath, Kate. I was just like, I don't know if I have a template for that, Kate. And I shared it, and I think from that moment on, I felt like, this is great. Like, you sort of broke through my work world and my community world right then, and I think it's been a great relationship ever since.
It has, and I think, and that actually is a great segue into my question. One of my questions for you, because I just needed a template because I also do government consulting. I'm like, oh, that's really smart, and I know she's really organized. I bet she has something, and you did, by the way. But what do you think keeps people, especially women, but what do you think keeps people from opening up those channels? Like, what is? You mentioned it's scary, and I know, but like, what is that? What do you think? Everyone chime in too after Danielle.
So I think it's a little bit of fear, the unknown. You have to really just trust that you're in a group of people where if you say something, just I have this idea in the back of my head, or I have this thing I'm thinking about, that if you say that out loud, someone's not going to just throw that away. So I think that getting over that little speed bump of fear is what gets us in our way sometimes. But that quote that you opened with, that's something that I said to Amy. I had this idea for something and it was really just nagging. And I just casually said to Amy, "Hey, Amy, I'm thinking about doing this." And what she said was, oh my gosh, have you met? And then she went on this long list, and she amplified my whole network, and she really just breathed life into that idea. And I think that's another benefit here, that we might not let our own ideas really see the light of day sometimes, but if you could be brave and you can share that, if you could collaborate with other women especially, I think that there's this potential for big things to happen from little ideas.
So true. Anybody else want to kind of chime in on that idea of what keeps us from some of that collaboration, reaching out? Malie, I see you nodding. Do you have any thoughts?
I think just as human beings, we have been taught to compare ourselves to other people and have an idea of what success looks like based on, I don't know, films or media or the people around you. And so this idea of success that we desire, if it's not within our grasp, we don't necessarily want to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable for failure, because we might not live up to that ideal. So I find myself, and especially in my earlier days in the career, in my 20s, I would have a difficult time asking for help or collaborating with other people, not because I didn't think that they were worthy or that they were amazing. I just didn't know if I was able to contribute to the level of leading to that success. So it's also self-doubt that keeps us. It's not necessarily the other person, it's usually internal.
I think that's so true. And we all expect so much of ourselves, and we assume everybody else knows things already, when really we're all just figuring it out. It's just some people are better at faking it than others. And
did you see in the comments, Nancy Rice just said, we come from a culture that teaches us that we're competing for scarce resources. That is so important. This is not a pie that we're cutting into. The world is abundant. It's not these tiny little bits of resources that we're competing for. That's so important, Nancy.
Oh, that is really the heart of it all. There's enough to go around. There's more than enough to go around. And in fact, it's like the more we all support each other, then the stronger everybody will be. We don't have to all be exactly the same. Terrible. Okay, Malie, well, I was going to pass it on to you anyway. I would love to hear your perspective and what you bring. Tell us about what you're working on and kind of how that fits in with this conversation. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So I want to share two perspectives, one from childhood and one from adulthood. And one from childhood. I'm a child refugee of war. I came here when I was 5 years old from Laos, so it's a war-torn country after the whole Vietnam era. And I grew up believing that anything was possible because of my parents. Even though they didn't speak English, they worked 3 jobs. They just were so grateful to be alive. So that was a great mindset to have in the home. But I also think about the community around me, my teachers, the people who saw something special in me that allowed me to be the woman that I am today. So I share that because today, the movement that we created with the SOAR community Nebula is all about what came from that childhood experience, mentorship, people who are committed to helping others, people who want to create change, positive change in the world, because I was a direct recipient of that. So Nebula is a membership community that we built. We invite business leaders and community leaders from all walks of life from around the world to come together to learn, collaborate, and mastermind for the sole purpose of creating social good, creating positive change in the world. The second perspective is, as an adult, when I left college and worked really hard to graduate with 3 degrees and 4 languages, again, because of fear and scarcity mentality. I don't regret having all of those things happen and achieving those accomplishments, but I knew where it came from. It came from fear. And when I went into the workforce, I learned the opposite. I learned what it felt like to not have a collaborative experience, to have bosses who stole my work, who did not see me, who did not value my gifts. And so that's why the SOAR Community Network, the mission of our business, is helping to build communities within organizations where people are seen with compassion to create more cohesion, so that collaboration can happen. So those are the two perspectives that I bring. And I love this conversation because you can't have collaboration without compassion that leads to cohesion, understanding, a psychological safety that must exist in order for us to collaborate and thrive together. So it's all comes down to mindfulness, consciousness, compassion for us in the work that we do.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think the key is? And it's, I think you just kind of answered it with, that idea of compassion and collaboration. I wanted to ask the whole panel, truly, what are your thoughts on this model of collaboration over competition? Like where have you seen some great examples of it happening? Where do you think how do you think we might change the way people work together? And what might that
is a good example of this sort of collective sharing and growing. There's a group called Opportunity Neighborhoods. It's a collective impact project. I sit on the leadership team in Herndon, but they're happening in other places. But the idea is we all come together. The idea is, even though you might be a similar business or a similar nonprofit, we all care about this community. We bring our best to the table and we share our resources, and we all do better because we all do better. So that's a really good example of that.
I will share that I feel with collaboration over competition, just like our fingerprints were so unique, I think it comes down to recognizing the values and the mission of each organization, getting to the deeper level of that, because they are unique. And I feel like once you have a shared value, the ways in which you go about them are different. And that's really where the collaboration can take place. So you might want to map to the same North Star, but there's so many different ways to get to that North Star. The communities you want to serve might be slightly different or completely different. The products and service, the ways in which you want to create that change or to accomplish that mission or goal might require many different resources and mechanisms. And I feel like if you can identify your sweet spot and then share that with each other, you'll realize very quickly that there's no competition here, that you should be walking in alignment with one another and sharing resources, because at the end of the day, the impact it will be much more immense and exponential.
Yeah, and then for me, I think when you think about advocacy, it can be challenging because you're fighting for attention and, of your representatives. You have issues that you really care about, and sometimes it's hard to say, well, what if we spent some of our time advocating for others in a way that helps raise their voices, with the understanding that hopefully they'll also come and advocate for us when we need additional support. It's only by looking, at the broader picture of where are we trying to go as a, community or as a state, that we can really start to see that this is a much bigger movement than it is trying to move one piece of legislation or to work on just one issue. I mean, when you look at the community problems we face, they're all intertwined and they're all interconnected. And so by artificially siloing the type of work we do, we're actually hurting ourselves in terms of being able to think more creatively and a bigger picture. And I remember on Facebook a number of months ago, one of my colleagues he had done research on the movement in the Middle East. And he said, it was really successful in Tahrir Square for a long time because people were coming out and they were protesting and they were showing up for other people's issues. And it wasn't until they stopped showing up for other people's issues that things broke down. And so if we don't show up for other people's issues, we're going to not only lose on their issues, we're going to lose on our issues too. And so realizing that movements require a broader perspective, and that and if we don't collaborate, we won't be able to build the power that we will need to win in the long
run. That just gave me goosebumps because, I think right now of the Black Lives Matter. Some people don't quite understand why it's so important to zoom in on that issue. And I think there's that natural reaction to say, well, all lives matter. And I understand that reaction. I understand that people want everyone to feel important, but that is right there, Louisa. It's the idea that, yes, all lives matter, but right now, it is this group that really needs help. And we need to turn our attention to that. And if we do that, and help them get stronger and help them stand, then everybody will be stronger for it. And then when things come back, you know, it will all be pushing in the same direction. And we just need to focus our attention here, even though it's still taking us this way. So it's so powerful. I wanted to call out a note that Andrian, I'm sorry if I'm butchering it, mentioned, but she wrote, since we kind of have done a collective pause with COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, is there now a collective urge to collaborate? I thought that was a great question. Would love to hear your thoughts. Lily?
I'll take that one. I think with our members, for sure, there's a longing, a desire as human beings to connect. And the computer screen does help because now we can actually see each other, but we still can't look into our eyeballs. I mean, depending on where your camera is, it's just kind of awkward, right? So there is desire to not only connect, but definitely collaborate, because everybody's lives have changed, have been impacted. And collaboration is coming up with what Danielle said, new ideas that we need to breathe life into. And we can't do that when we're depressed, when we're high anxiety, when we're scared. So it's like reaching out to your best friends. And as you go through COVID, everybody, because of the shared fear and anxiety, feels like your best friend when you actually say hi to each other, because now we have the same place to start from, right? It's not like, hey, you don't understand what I'm going through, so I can't really connect with you. And I think it's a beautiful thing in many ways that we're able to really create this sense of community. And now we can come from a same central place of understanding. Sometimes you can't understand culture, or you can't understand even pigmentation of skin, where you've been through your life experiences, but we can, when we say COVID, we can certainly start there. And I think that helps.
All right, thank you. We have such great comments here. Louisa, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so we just finished taking our program that I run at Georgetown in nonprofit management online. And at the end of it, it was really telling to me that so many of these nonprofit leaders were talking about how important it was to collaborate. And I think it's because they're realizing that to be resilient, you need others around you. You just can't do it on your own anymore, because we just don't know what to expect. And so to be a strong organization, you need a strong network and you need a strong community around you. And I think for a long time, as you know, someone mentioned earlier on, we felt like that because there were scarce resources, we had to sort of fight alone for our piece of the pie. And organization leaders are starting to realize that that fight is actually going to hurt them more than trying to find ways to reach out and to collaborate.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to, before I think Amy, we're gonna take it to the next, kind of start wrapping up, but Danielle, I saw someone comment, Opportunity Neighborhood is coming to Colmore. So great initiative.
That is so exciting. Congratulations, Colmore. You're going to be such a great community because of it.
Well, thank you so much. Amy, did you have, I saw you unmute ready.
Yeah, well, I noticed Christine mentioned a very unlikely partnership in the chat that I wanted to call attention to. She said, see the movie Pride about the gay London community supporting Welsh miners when they were on strike. And then a year later, the miners supported gays' entry into the union. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Christine. There's so many fantastic comments in here. I wish we had a few more minutes, but we do have to wrap up. I know Stair has a few comments that she's going to pop on at the end. So I will just say thank you so much to all of our panelists for your perspectives and your thoughts, and to our attendees. You have so many good points in here, and John had asked the question in the Q&As, is there a way to save the chat and distribute the chat, because there's a lot of great resources in here, and Robin confirmed that they will do that and distribute it. And so Kate, if you have, Robin, if you don't mind switching to the next slide really quickly, we can go off for the panelists. So obviously we have been talking about collaboration over competition, and we all fully support and believe that, but for the next election, winning is the only option. So we pass that along, and as you leave, think about that green-eyed monster question again from the beginning, and think about that person or that organization or that group, that what strengths do they have that would help support and bolster you, and also what can you give them from your diverse perspectives. Bring one another together to create that unexpected and powerful partnership. So I believe, Kate, unless you have anything else to add, we will pass it on to Stair.
No, I just want to say thank you, everyone. These comments are fantastic. I'm reading them. I know Jeffrey, you try to do the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact movement is to work with the fair vote folks and support ranked choice voting and other issues related but tangential. I can't say that word. Nonprofits have been trading advice on how to navigate COVID-related federal and small business grants. It sounds like these things are happening all over, which I find very inspiring. And I do believe it's kind of a new way. I don't know if it's always been like this or it's stronger now, but this could be a whole other conversation. But I wanted to thank everybody and our panelists. And then we will hand it back to Stair. I think she's going to talk about some t-shirts, which I know I'm going to go buy one. So Stair.
Thank you for that lead in. Let me first thank you for a wonderful panel and everybody who was on it. And today was brought to you by the letter E, so that was to empower. So thank you for empowering us today. So set your clocks for tomorrow. Okay, so we have the second part of the Impact Center Leadership Boot Camp. So owning chaos at noon. So take a look at that and get yourself signed up for that. And importantly is Let's Talk ERA What's Next. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Founders of the newly formed Virginia chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus, represented by Andrea Miller, Katie Hornig, and Eileen Davis, along with Attorney General Mark Herring and Deputy Solicitor General Michelle Kalin, will review where we are today, the future of the ERA, and how women can use their power to finish what we started nearly 100 years ago. The summit recap will be sent to you, and the videos are up on our networknova.org // Please don't forget to take a look at the Badass Boutique. We are encouraging everyone to get a t-shirt. This is our retro team t-shirt that we have, and it's really quite cute, and it runs a little small. And that's at networknova.org /shop. So there's also postcards, caps, masks, and mugs. And last but not least, one more special shout out to our faithful sponsors and partners. Win Virginia, family-friendly economy, Virginia our way. Our partners, Vote Like a Girl, Rowan Tree, who brought you today. The Impact Center, SOAR, Malia's here today. Bard's Alley, Sam's Headshots, Virginia's Lists, Resisterhood, and Forward. Thank you all. Stay safe, stay strong, stay together. Winning is the only option.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Stair.
Bye. Thank
you
you.
all.